Movies of 1999.
Well, hello everyone and welcome to episode 38 of the Movies of 1999, a podcast where we watch a movie from 1999 each week as selected by a bingo machine. My name is Jason Hutchins.
And I'm Craig Talbot.
And in this week's episode we're going to be talking about the movie The Limey, which has been paired with Payback. Now, Craig, why do you think I might have selected The Limey to be on my A-list of movies?
It's a Steven Soderbergh movie, I guess, though one of his lesser movies from what I can gather. It got 92% Rotten Tomatoes score by
quite
critics.
high, isn't it?
Yep, and 78% score user reviews. It won one minor award. It's quite written about quite a bit and reasonably highly regarded by critics and stuff like that.
That's pretty much it. I mean, it's on a lot of lists of movies of 99 and it's a Soderbergh film, so I'd never seen it, but it made sense for it to be on the A-list. Why do you think I paired it with Payback?
Pretty obvious, this one. The word payback pretty much gives it away, I think.
I think so.
They're all about revenge, both movies. So,
the revenge flick, that's right.
Action revenge movies, both of them. So, this was an easy one this week. It wasn't too hard to work out what was going on.
So, Payback being a Mel Gibson movie, so it was good to have a Mel Gibson movie in the mix. I think it's the only one from 1999.
Okay.
So, stick around to the end of this podcast where we'll be crossing live to this week's movie night for the spinning of the bingo balls, and we'll find out which movies we'll be talking about on next week's show. But right now, let's go over to ChatGPT for its synopsis of The Limey.
In The Limey, Terence Stamp delivers a powerful performance as Wilson, a hardened British ex-convict who travels to Los Angeles to investigate the suspicious death of his daughter. Convinced that a shady music producer named Terry Valentine, played by Peter Fonda, is responsible, Wilson embarks on a relentless quest for vengeance. Along the way, he enlists the help of his daughter's friend Elaine, portrayed by Leslie Ann Warren, and her associate Eduardo, played by Luis Guzman. The film is a gripping tale of retribution and redemption, as Wilson confronts both his past and the dangerous underworld that may have claimed his daughter's life.
And Craig, what did you think of this movie?
I thought it was okay. I think it's essentially a Terence Stamp vehicle, really, isn't it? He's the central character in the movie.
He's very central, more central than most central characters, because of the way that this movie has been edited, which is what's really interesting about it. But Terence Stamp, we've seen him in Bowfinger and The Phantom Menace this year so far, I think. So he was getting around a bit. He's playing a very Cockney sort of criminal in this movie, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he plays closer to his his normal type, I guess. He's very reflective in this movie, but also, that they apparently there was some argument between the director Steven Soderbergh and Lem Dobbs about how much Cockney language to use, because Lem Dobbs originally had only put a little bit in there, but Steven Soderbergh added in quite a bit more, which then, of course, has to be explained to people. I mean, I'm quite comfortable with it because, being an ABC and BBC watcher for years, I'm quite familiar with Cockney slang, but
There's one moment where he gives quite a long-winded speech, which is just filled with so many Cockney phrases. It's taking it right up to the line. It almost becomes overboard, I think.
Apparently, the commentary track for this particular movie is legendary because there's quite a lot of argument between Lem Dobbs, Steven Soderbergh, and I'm not quite sure I can't remember exactly who else is on the track. But apparently, this movie is most famous for its commentary track. The commentary.
And that was recorded later, wasn't it? For
I believe so, for the
10-year
DVD
anniversary or something like that.
Yeah. There's also an article on Roger Ebert's site for the 20th anniversary of this movie. So again, one that quite a lot of people write about. obviously it also has Peter Fonda in it as well, playing a creepy character. Which
he does creepy pretty well, I think.
Yeah.
It might come naturally to him.
Yeah, which Steven Soderbergh wasn't sure about. And then he wasn't sure that he could play the character well. And then he actually met him because he'd only seen him on film. And apparently when he met him in real life, he realised that he could do it. Like he was a different kind of person. So, yeah, an interesting one. So budget-wise, this movie cost $10 million to make. It was one of Steven Soderbergh's independent, it's pretty much an independent film, you could call this. And it only did $3.2 million at the box office. It followed on from another movie, I believe, is called Out of Sight, which was very, very
that was his previous
successful.
movie,
yeah, was very successful for Steven Soderbergh. And then not very long after this, Steven Soderbergh obviously did Erin Brockovich, which was extremely successful.
Yeah, he did a bunch, didn't he? Like in a whole sequence. I think the next 5 years it's Erin Brockovich, Traffic, Ocean's 11 and Solaris, all of which are pretty good movies.
Yeah, a lot of his later movies I'm familiar with, like Erin Brockovich, obviously, and it's a very, very good movie. I found this little factoid interesting. You know how we noticed that there was footage of Terence Stamp as a young man
in
the movie, and we were trying to work out how they did that. So apparently what happened was there was a movie from 1967 called The Poor Cow, which is Ken Loach's directorial debut, and it was owned by Warner Brothers and obviously has Terence Stamp in it. So they used sections of that movie in this movie to show him with his baby daughter and wife. Apparently, Terence Stamp's actual role is quite minor in the movie Poor Cow. But there was a little bit of controversy because Steven Soderbergh wasn't sure which bits of Poor Cow he wanted to use, and Warner Brothers didn't want to give him permission to use the film. He wanted the whole film. He wanted permission to use any bit of the film that he could. And originally, Warner Brothers said, no, you can't have it because you just have to tell us exactly what you want. But Soderbergh then told the head of Warner Brothers that if he did that, he'd never make another film from him again. And so the executive relented, and Soderbergh was then allowed to use what he wanted. So
I wonder if
another
he used
example
a accent while making that threat.
God knows. But interestingly, another example of a director having power over executives at the time.
And I think this was very typical of the time. And the other thing that this movie has is a very unique and original way of editing to tell the story, which is really noticeable. It really stands out. In one of the reviews, I learned that it's called Soviet montage theory.
Oh, right.
This editing technique. But basically it just puts you in the mind of the main character, the Terence Stamp character, because he's constantly remembering things or thinking of what is about to transpire. So even at the beginning of the movie, they're using a shot from the very end of the movie, and he's sort of remembering what happened, and it keeps on cutting between different time periods, but it's always in the context of him thinking about or remembering things. I thought it was very interesting. Yeah.
Apparently, there was a conversation with Soderbergh at one point about the fact that people constantly say that you can't show in movies that people are thinking. And he sort of said, I think that's a total lie. And this is actually on the commentary track. Lem Dobbs actually mentions this. So Steven Soderbergh wanted to get a lot of these shots of Terence Stamp being meditative, as he calls it, on the commentary track. And so, that's part of what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I can't really think of another movie that's done it to this degree. And they even use this filter to represent his thoughts and stuff like that. So the light is a little bit interesting.
A little bit different, Apparently, according to the book that you and I have, which, inspired this podcast, one of the reasons why they were able to do a lot of the stuff is because they were experimenting with the new piece of software called Avid, which was the film editing software. And it actually comes up in both of the movies from this week. Because of being able to use the electronic editing using this Avid software, they were able to move the editors were able to move the scenes around to where they wanted to have them. So even though they were shot in a particular order, they could just move them around wherever they wanted much more easily. So this is an example of that Avid software being used to, and they were being very experimental with it because it was a new thing to be able to do that in this time period.
Yeah, there's so much experimentation in movies at this time, but I guess this technique didn't really catch on because I haven't seen it in any other movie. I should have mentioned that Melissa George, a Perth girl, is in this movie as well. I think you spotted her. You commented on that. And Louis Guzman, of course, who we last saw in Magnolia. I think he was he was like he went to acting school, or no, he worked with her or something like that. I can't remember. But
Louis Guzman. Yeah, and Leslie Ann Warren's in it as well. Barry Newman, a whole bunch of people that you regularly see in movies. I think we've seen Leslie Ann Warren in a movie as well. Is she the one that's from that girl movie where they drive the car off the cliff at the end, and I've forgotten its name?
No, and she's totally not. But...
okay, yeah. I'm sure we've seen her in a movie this year anyway. Yeah, so this debuted at Cannes, did really well at Cannes, and then was released later in the US, but unfortunately didn't do that well. The first song heard in the movie, by the way,
she was in Twin Falls, Idaho.
Oh, there you go. Right. Thank you for that. The first song heard in the movie is The Seeker by The Who. Little factoid related to this is that during the 1960s, one of The Who's two managers was a gentleman by the name of Christopher Stamp, who just happens to be Terence Stamp's brother.
Oh,
so there you go.
That's interesting. And of course, Peter Fonda's a music manager in this movie, isn't he? Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And they're both, from the 60s, that sort of 60s era. Interesting there was some scenes that weren't used in the film where Peter Fonda shot some scenes with Anne Margaret, and she played his ex-wife, but they decided not to use them because they felt that they originally had them to make Peter Fonda look even more creepy than he already is in the movie, but they decided not to use them because he decided that he was already creepy enough. They didn't need to make it more so they cut it down. I can't believe this is a factoid that IMDb felt the need to have, because I was quite shocked by this one, but it explains that when Wilson calls Roel Fangio during the car chase, it obviously is talking about Juan Manuel Fangio, who's the 5-time Formula One world champion in the 1950s. To me, that was just an obvious one. Maybe it's because of my upbringing.
Yeah.
But for maybe others, it wasn't.
I had no idea what he was talking about.
Well, you talk. Look, it's a piece of slang that I use. If people are driving too fast, you say, you sort of say, "Stop driving like Fangio." You're not Fangio. But anyway, okay, fair enough. Well, there you go. Maybe that's just my upbringing. Louis Guzman is seen wearing shirts with famous political figures on them. At the beginning, it's Ayatollah Khomeini, Ernest Che Guevara, and then later on he's wearing a shirt with Mao Zedong.
Yeah, I noticed that.
On it. I don't know why that was a thing. There's a whole bunch of factoids based around the commentary track for this.
I'm going to have to listen to the commentary track. I like a good commentary track, and I kind of miss them. We don't get them anymore.
I don't know where to get the commentary track from now, because have you got the DVD? Or?
No, I don't have the DVD.
Yeah, so apparently there's a lot of things about this. They like that the film was mostly about older characters, since most of the characters are over 50, and they kind of missed that aspect in film where characters can be older and more. Dobb liked the fact that the characters were kind of tired in this movie, and it kind of felt a bit like a Western.
Right, yes.
And that theme will come up again. I thought this one was cool. Originally, the screenplay was envisioned that Michael Caine would play Terence Stamp's character.
I could see that
which,
working.
to be honest,
but he's probably a little bit too well known, I guess.
I think he would have played it brilliantly, but it would have been different. Yeah, it would have been a Michael Caine movie. I think Terence Stamp, to be fair, is what makes this movie. He really,
it's all about him. Yeah.
It is all about him. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
I also like the way how it just drops you right into the story. You know what I mean? Like there's no setup. You don't.
Yeah.
No, he's just there doing something, and it takes you a while to cotton on to exactly what's happened.
And then it flicks back and forwards to try and explain what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought this movie, unlike probably a couple of movies that we've seen, narratively it worked better because at least you did understand what on earth was going on most of the time. Though I think I did say I didn't really understand what was going on at the beginning. But to be fair, it did actually make more sense. I think I was doing that mostly to stir Will up. But anyway, so there's an do you remember the story in the car, Jace, where he's talking to his girlfriend, the young girlfriend, Peter Fonda, I mean. He's talking to his girlfriend in the car as they're driving off to the little hideout he has on the beach. Yeah, so apparently there was a different story that was originally that was written by Lem Dodds. And then Peter Fonda came up with his own story, which is actually from his own real life, which is this one about the deer. And they shot that one as well. And then Steven Soderbergh decided, well, that one sounded a lot better because it was, he just seemed more energetic and more alive and more interesting. So they actually went with his real life story instead of the one that was in the script. So,
and they do drive to that hideout on the beach, like the worst hideout, because there's just all these open glass windows and stuff like that. Yeah. But what I liked about that ending in the hideout is kind of how incompetent everyone was. Like, it was more realistic in a way. Like, they weren't being comically incompetent, but it's just if you're in a house like that at nighttime and there's people with guns, then mistakes are going to be made. You're going to shoot the wrong guy and all of that sort of stuff. So I did like that, how that sort of transpired. Yeah,
I think the movie was well directed and well shot.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's not like a movie that I'm going to go back to and watch again because it was wonderful. But look, it is liked by a lot of people. It was a box office flop.
Yeah.
It was fairly cheaply made. He was allowed to make it because of the success of Out of Sight. And it didn't do him any harm because the next year he did Erin Brockovich and Traffic and
like I said, he just had a string of hits after this, didn't he?
Yeah. So
what did you think of the ending though? The way that it was resolved at the end, because it is this revenge film, and he does get to the point where he's pointing a gun at the guy.
Yes.
And then he walks away. So what do you make of that?
Yeah, I guess that's sort of like his redemption, isn't it? It's like, because the whole thing just kind of felt kind of weird that he would just fly all this way to, come and kill this guy who he wasn't even sure if he'd actually killed his daughter or whatever. So
that's right.
It's just a bit like the next movie that we're going to talk about. There's just like this ridiculous amount of death. For very, very... Well, I mean, I think you can characterize both of these movies as everyone dies, but no one's really sure why.
Yeah.
Everyone dies for very, very little reason.
Well, the next movie is even more ridiculous because the amount of money that he's trying to recover is just...
so tiny.
So tiny compared to the wreckage. Anyway.
Yeah, so Roger Ebert gave this movie 3 out of 4 stars. And he sort of says, what is the Limey about? Drugs, girls, guns and revenge? Not at all. It's about retirement. It's about tough guys who talk big but are past their sell-by dates. They're not fast enough for the ageless Limey, who was cured in prison like beef jerky and comes in low and fast. Soderbergh's visuals place them in the internal world of the Count of California, wealth and sun, heaven's waiting room, as he says, where the old look young until they look dead. When Wilson gets off the plane from London, they might as well take their zeitgeist and stick it where the zeit don't geist. I thought that was an interesting line.
Well, I don't know what he's talking about this week.
I think what he's saying is that, you have all these old people, like you've got this Peter Fonda guy who's still acting like he's a 20-year-old. He's hanging out with all these young women, all that kind of stuff.
But you were saying that they were happy that they could make a movie that where people were old.
Older.
Older. You were
saying this is Roger Ebert's review. This is Roger Ebert's review, though. In the 20th anniversary review of the film by Matt Seger, who is also obviously works on Roger Ebert's site, he just says it's full of characters out of their element trying to maintain the energy of their youth. and it's like a reminder of a lost era at the box office. When movies like this, you can have older characters doing all these sort of really, full-on things. This is before Soderbergh really was a big-name, award-winning filmmaker. So, this is not a crowd pleaser, this movie. It's not someone where someone's going to walk out of it, happy all of that kind of stuff. Look, that was interesting. Emmanuel Levy, you'll be happy to know it's not the other bloke from Variety this week.
Oh, good.
He actually compares this movie to a Western.
It is a bit like a Western, yeah.
Yeah, it is. In which two aging criminals must face the rapidly changing conditions around them and face their own identity and their mortality. And I think that's probably why in the end he doesn't shoot him, because he's like, oh, look, you're really just an old guy who's,
Yeah, but they also tie it back to the love from the daughter, the girl who died.
Yeah, I think
she was in love
with
both of these men, with her father and with this old guy that she'd chapped up
and he
with.
realises that some of the stuff that she was saying was because of stuff he used to say to her. She used to always threaten him about going to the police.
That's right.
And, Peter Fonda's character took that the wrong way, not knowing that history,
Yep.
The Limey is a revenge thriller, I guess, is what we can say about that. And interestingly, shot one, as I said, I think I said on the movie night, you can see this movie was kind of made in the edit more than anywhere else.
Yeah.
And according to Lem Dobbs, the screenwriter, because he's grumpy about bits of it, the way things are done. Apparently there's a lot of to and fro between Soderbergh and Lem Dobbs about the movie.
Are they both on the commentary track, are they?
Yes, they're both on the commentary track. And there's a lot of argument between. Yeah. It's apparently quite a legendary commentary track. It's because there's a lot of argument between the two of them about aspects of the movie and like, I don't know why you did this. And unlike Lem Dobbs denying any responsibility for certain sections of the movie, because there are some scenes, and then Soderbergh's like, well, I had to do that because otherwise it would have made sense because your script didn't make sense or whatever it was. There's a lot of to and fro between them. So apparently it's a very famous commentary track.
I'm going to see if I can track that down, because I'd be interested to hear about it.
I wish I'd known about it before we did the podcast, because I would have listened to it myself. But I only found out about it too late to be able to be ready for this. So.
Lem Dobbs was the writer for Dark City, which was a year before.
Yeah, apparently Lem Dobbs considers this particular script one of his worst. But,
okay. And The Hard Way, I liked The Hard Way. It's like this one with Michael J. Fox. Going into the ghetto to learn how to be a detective, because he's playing an actor. So where's Lem Dobbs from? So Dark City was an Australian movie. He's from the UK. Okay.
Yeah, he's English. Yeah, very much so.
Interesting.
Yep.
Well, there you go. That's the Limey. Interesting one this week. And I can hear now the approaching music of Craig's.
All right. Welcome to the intermission, everyone. This week, again, we're taking a little bit of a turn to the left. And this week I decided to look at a book. Actually had something else planned, but I haven't had time to get through all of the things that I need to get through for the intermission. So we're doing Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events, and the first book, which was published in September 30th, 1999, which is called The Bad Beginning.
Interesting.
I don't know if you have...
I've never read the books, but I was just going to say that I think this is the fourth turn to the left that we've taken, so we've gone a full circle now. So maybe next week we'll be back on course.
Well, yeah, no, I refuse to stay on course. So next week we'll just have to turn right again. So the Bad Beginning, as I mentioned, is the first book in a series called A Series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket, much loved by children. It's the pen name of a gentleman by the name of Daniel Handler. It is a gothic and absurdist fiction novel which introduces us to the Baudelaire siblings, Violet, Klaus, and Sonny. The story begins with the children receiving tragic news that their parents have died in a fire. They're very well-off children. Their family's very rich and all that kind of stuff. The kids are down at the beach, and when they return back from someone comes to them on the beach. Dr. Poe, Mr. Poe, comes to tell them on the beach that their house is burned down and their parents have died in the fire. And then the children's lives take a turn for the worse from there, and continue to take a turn for the worse pretty much through the entire series of books, from what I understand. I haven't read all of the books. I've only read 2. The first one, The Bad Beginning, and last night I just finished The Reptile Room, which is the second one, which I'm not sure if that was published in 1999 or not. But anyway, we'll talk about it in a minute. They are placed in the care of the sinister Count Olaf, who is determined to steal their inheritance. And the poor siblings face much hardship, many challenges, and definitely a lot of misery because of Olaf. And they are forced to perform chores, and they then end up participating in a play that's part of Olaf's evil scheme. So the books have been adapted into a film and also into a Netflix TV series as well.
And that's where I know it, because I watched that with my kids. Yeah.
Right. Yes. I've not seen the film or the TV series.
The TV series is pretty good for what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So Violet is. So the 3 main characters are Violet, Klaus, and Sonny. Violet, she's the elder sibling, and at the beginning of the book, she's 14 years old, and she's an inventive genius, and she can create any gadget or invention, and she has this habit of tying her hair up in a ribbon when she's getting really serious about things. And Klaus, he's 12 years old, and he's a very good reader, and he reads very widely, so he's always finding crucial information to help them get out of whatever situation they happen to be in, and he's got a very good memory. And then Sonny, well, at least in the books that I've read, Sonny is only like an infant, a baby, and she has this love of biting things with her teeth. And that particular skill is put to good use in a number of very bizarre situations. So, and then she always has this weird way of talking, like she just uses random words, but they all seem to know what she means. So, yeah, they're known to be really resilient, and they've got a very strong bond between them. Count Olaf is, in the 2 books anyway that I've read, he's the villain in those 2. And it's a dark comedy, you know.
Yeah.
So I would have thought it was something that you would like, because it's a bit dark. It's a bit
the TV
of
show was good, and Neil Patrick Harris as like Doogie Howser, his Count Olaf, and does a really good job.
Yeah. So the poor unfortunate children. The book is always warning that, you know, you shouldn't read these if you don't like bad things happening. So this is from the actual website. It says, "Are you made faint-hearted by death? Does fire unnerve you? Is a villain something that might crop up in nightmares of yours? Or are you thrilled by nefarious plots? Is cold porridge upsetting to you? Vicious threats, hooks, uncomfortable clothing?" Your answers to these questions will reveal whether a series of unfortunate events will be ill-suited to your personal use. And it suggests that you should find other books, or get someone to suggest better books. So it's one of these books that tries to convince you not to read it. There's a whole series of these things, which I know the kids in my various different classes over the years have loved. You know, there's a series of books by the Andy from Andy and Hamish, which says, "Don't turn the page of this book." Right. Because something is going to happen. Like don't turn the next page, you know. And the kids absolutely love it. The monster at the
end of the book kind of thing.
The monster at the end of the book kind of thing. So it's in that sort of style, and it's always like, you know, don't read this book because you're not going to like it, you know. And it sort of foreshadows the bad things that are going to happen constantly. So, it's, you know, poor kids. But I quite like. I read the 2 of them. They're only very short books, obviously designed for children. But I quite enjoyed reading the 2 books that I've read so far. I probably will have a look at the
Netflix
the TV series.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah. But yeah, just something a little bit different for the intermission before we get back to revenge and murder.
Well, now that we've done the full circle, yeah, we'll be back to it. So looking forward to next week.
So that's the intermission, everyone.
Alrighty, and now let's go over to ChatGPT for its synopsis of the movie Payback.
In Payback, Mel Gibson delivers a gritty performance as Porter, a hardened criminal who is double-crossed and left for dead by his partner Val Resnick, played by Greg Henry. Determined to recover the $70,000 he's owed, Porter dives deep into the criminal underworld, much like Terence Stamp's character in The Limey. Along the way, he confronts crime syndicates and corrupt officials, mirroring the relentless quest for vengeance seen in the previous film. Maria Bello co-stars as Rosie, Porter's estranged wife who becomes an unexpected ally, while Chris Christopherson appears as the menacing crime boss, Bronson. Payback is a relentless tale of retribution and justice, echoing the themes of revenge and redemption found in The Limey.
Craig, what did you think of Payback?
I didn't actually mind it that much. It's very violent again, another violent movie.
Yeah.
Probably not as stylish and as The Limey.
It's not as stylish.
Yeah.
No. It felt like an old movie. Like when you compare it to other movies from this year, it just had that feeling of being an old movie. Like it's set in the 70s, right? So they drive all the old cars.
Yeah.
It has that feel to it.
Yeah, it's got that 70s sort of feel. It's got that Chicago sort of feel to it.
And there's something about the colour of the movie. It looks very washed out.
It's got a blue tint to it. It had a deliberate blue tint to the whole movie, which is apparently a Chicago thing, apparently according to the research that I did. This movie actually has quite a lot of controversy around it.
Oh, okay.
But we'll get to that. So it's credited with being directed by Brian Helgeland, and the screenplay was by Brian Helgeland and Terry Hayes.
Okay.
And it's based on a book called The Hunter by Richard Stark. Again, only a 56% score on Rotten Tomatoes and 69% score by user reviews or Popcorn Meter or whatever they call it now. Won a couple of minor awards like the previous movie. Neither of them really featured in the awards sort of thing. But this one has a fair bit of controversy around it that comes up later. Roger Ebert gave it 3 out of 4 stars again, so he quite liked this one. He sort of says, not many people know what their life's worth. The hero of Payback tells us right at the beginning, I do, 70 grand. That's what they took me, and that's what I'm going to get back. And if you absorb that statement, it is crazy. If you absorb that statement and take a close look at the title, you have a good idea of what the movie's about, basically. The only remaining question, according to Ebert, is it about it entertainingly? And his answer is yes. So I thought it was. So the poster for this movie is something like that: "Get ready to root for the bad guy."
Yes.
But in Australia, Mel Gibson made them change that because obviously root has a different meaning in Australia.
Which isn't really the case anymore, like we all understand.
No, but it was back then.
To root for the bad guy. But even on the movie show, David and Margaret used that turn of phrase. So
right.
Like even at the time during their review, they called it rooting for the bad guy. And I don't think anyone was making a joke about it. But I mean, this is what the TV show Breaking Bad does quite successfully, is make you sympathetic for the character who ultimately becomes the bad guy. In this movie, maybe it doesn't work as well as that because he is a pretty nasty piece of work. And
yes, very much so.
And there's also a bit of unexpected Lucy Liu in this movie. We've seen her pop up before, but here she's a hooker.
She gets to show more of her talent and skill in this movie, definitely. And
it's a bit of BDSM and so forth. But just to loop back to the movie show, Margaret gave this movie 0. It's the first time I've seen David or Margaret give a movie 0.
Right. What did David give it?
David gave it 3.5.
Right, yeah.
So this is what Margaret said. I've got a quote written down. She said,
David, I loathe this film. I came so close to walking out, it wasn't funny. You know, I'm not into sadomasochism. Gosh, really nasty stuff. And I felt really uncomfortable because there's Mel, our Mel, with his big blue eyes and, he's cute as button. Well, I've got a bit of a problem rooting for this guy. It is so dislikable. I loathed it.
What are you going to give it?
No stars whatsoever.
Oh. None.
So she hated it.
Yeah. And that's interesting, isn't it? Because, I mean, you know that I don't like movies that make that make me really uncomfortable or are overly, whatever. There's been some movies this year where I've been very uncomfortable watching, but I didn't feel like that with this one at all. It was just
me neither.
I mean, it felt like a extension of Lethal Weapon, where instead of being a good guy, he was just the bad guy being,
And I think this was maybe the first movie where he had branched out and played that kind of a character, and it just hit Margaret Pomeranz so hard that she just could not appreciate the movie at all. Kind of crazy.
I mean, he's not a particularly good guy in the Mad Max movies. He's like a mostly good guy, but he's not like an ideal person or anything like that in those.
I think there's a reason that explains why he became like that, and maybe in this movie there's not.
Yeah, and that's true. It doesn't really make sense. Like I said about the previous movie, a lot of people die for very little cause.
Well, for $70,000, I mean, come on.
Just one person after another dies. It's like, really? You just thought everyone died? Anyway, this movie, budget-wise, cost $90 million to make.
That's crazy. That is so...
Which is a lot comparing it to the previous movie.
It's one of the most expensive movies of this year, isn't it?
It's getting up there. It's not one of the most expensive, but it's getting there. The box office was $161 million, though, so it was very successful at the box office. Probably because of Mel Gibson's name, I suspect. I thought Lucy Liu was very good in this movie. Interestingly, in the credits, they actually gave her middle name as well, which I thought was interesting. I'm not quite sure why they chose to do that, because I don't think I've seen that in any movie that she's been in. So there's a lot of controversy about this movie. Are you aware of that, Jason?
Well, yeah, when you mentioned it, so the director was fired or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, so Gibson and the producers actually removed Helgeland after he'd shot the most of the movie, and they then rewrote and reshot substantial portions of the film. In some things that I've read, up to a third of the movie was replaced. So Chris Christopherson, who becomes the major bad guy in this movie, isn't in the original cut of the movie at all, and he was added completely. So that whole section with Chris Christopherson, he's the mustachioed villain, right, who gets blown up. Yep. So that version was the one that was actually released. There is a director's cut that was released in 2006, which is actually shorter than this one. It's only 90 minutes.
And Helgeland did that one, did he? The director's cut?
So it's Helgeland's director's cut. It's called Payback straight up, and it differs quite substantially from the version released by the studio.
And does that have a separate...
And it's considered to be much better by the critics than this one. So, yeah, this film was filmed both in Chicago and Los Angeles in 1997. So, but wasn't released until February 1999. So, yeah, this is one that took a little while to get out there. But yeah, the main controversy around this is that a lot of people didn't like the violence and the sadism of the violence, and so a lot of the critics didn't like that. So a bit like Margaret, a lot of the critics gave it a bit of a hard time because of that.
Like, why didn't that hit us as hard as it hit them? What has changed over the last 25 years?
I think it's 25 years. I think we're used to seeing that kind of thing. Sadly. I mean, like every Netflix series is pretty intense these days and all that kind of stuff. So Roger Ebert said that he thought there was much cleverness and ingenuity in Payback, but Mel Gibson is the key. The movie wouldn't work without an actor who was heavy on his feet or too sincere about the material. So what he was referring was Mel Gibson's ability to be a little bit of a comedian as well as an action hero. Right. That mix of comic and action hero that he's able to do, which is, he's pretty famous for, I guess. So, yeah, Roger Ebert actually really liked this movie, but he was one of the few critics who did. Basically, one of the strange little things is Brian Helgeland actually won an Academy Award for LA Confidential in 1997.
Yeah, great.
He's quite
movie.
well known for that. And that's a fantastic movie. And he actually lost his job from this movie 2 days later. Because there's this whole sequence where he thought, because because he knew that he was in trouble with Gibson and a whole bunch of others, there was a lot of argument between him and Gibson, and he thought, I'll go to the Oscars and I'll win the Academy Award, and then all will be well, and they'll leave me alone. But no, Gibson got rid of him anyway. So
Gibson, of course, is a director himself and had already done Braveheart by this time, so you can imagine what it must be like.
Yeah, and it's his production company, Icon Productions.
His production company. He's a renowned director himself, and then Braveheart was.
So apparently though, Gibson really, really, really wanted to do the movie. So there's a whole story of where Helgeland showed him some pages from the original script, and Gibson basically said, "Can you be ready to shoot this in like 12 weeks?" Like he was really keen to get it done. But then there's this whole thing where he got fired after the Academy Award. So he had this high of winning the Academy Award, and then the low of being fired from his movie that he directed and wrote.
It's really interesting that there's a whole different version of this movie that was made like when he's Payback straight up. I was just looking at it. It's 2006, so I'm going to have to track that down because it is rated more highly than the original.
Yes, apparently considered quite quite good.
Which is quite a vindication for the director after getting fired.
Yeah. So that, I mean, look, I think Gibson sort of felt that the movie wasn't. They were worried about a lot of the scenes. There's a lot of quite violent scenes that were cut out of the movie. You'd be surprised to learn, given how violent the movie is, but some of them were even more over the top. So there's a thing where Porter rips out the eye of one of the guards, and there's a whole scene where he beats his wife quite severely, and all of that kind of stuff. And a lot of that stuff was pulled out of the theatrical release,
because they have to explain, like, she betrayed him. That's how the movie begins, and then there's flashbacks and stuff. But but Gibson himself is quite an accomplished director. Have you seen all of his movies, like The Passion of the Christ? And
not all of them, no.
What's that? Because he sort of did this thing in the years following where he decided to make movies in their original languages and not use English at all.
Yes,
so
that's right.
He does that in Passion of the Christ and Apocalypto as well, which are both amazing movies. Did you hear the news during the week that he's working on the sequel, Passion of the Christ to The Resurrection?
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, right.
So apparently Jesus is going to return. So after being
well, he kind of does, Jason. That's how the whole thing works. There's an entire religion based around that. Actually more than one religion. There's a whole bunch of them now. But anyway, let's move on. Yes. Okay. So look, I haven't actually watched Passion of the Christ. One of the reasons, there's a bunch of reasons for that.
It's an amazing movie.
I won't. I'm sure it is an amazing movie. There's some reasons why I haven't watched it.
It is very full on, and Mel Gibson.
That can stay off microphone.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Mel Gibson obviously went through a rough patch, and he's known for his anti-Semitism and so forth. So.
Yeah. We can leave that there. As Josh Molina said this week on the West Wing podcast, which
you're listening to it. Very good.
He's like, they were talking about something else, something to do with drug use, and Josh Molina was like, "No, that can stay off microphone. We can talk about that later."
Right? Yes.
So I've stolen that line from him. You'll be happy to know I'm up to the 7th episode of.
And you've listened to all the podcasts and watched all the West Wing. As well.
What I mean is I'm up to the 7th episode of the podcast, so I've now caught up to the episodes that I've watched.
It is such a great way to rewatch the West Wing.
Yeah. I have to be honest, the first two I wasn't too sure about because they were a bit dull, but then they started bringing in like Julie Hill and
that's right.
The one with, I've forgotten the lady who plays Donna, but that's the one I just listened to.
They are so great.
And that was fascinating. Yeah. And there's insights into it that I hadn't really thought about before. Like that whole thing about, the love affair between her character and anyway, we'll talk about that on the podcast at some other point. But
or we can leave it to the West Wing Weekly podcast because we're not really going to do a better job than those guys.
No, it is quite interesting the way they do it. There's a bit of controversy actually about who then. So obviously Chris Christopherson was brought into the movie very, very late, and his whole character and his whole story arc was added after Brian Helgeland had left. So he wasn't in the original movie at all. And in fact, the reason why there was delay was because Mel Gibson was already filming Lethal Weapon 4.
Right.
So they had to sort of film bits when he was available. They're not actually, there's a bit of controversy about who actually directed the reshoots of the film. So after Brian Helgeland left, Mel Gibson says it's a guy called, the production designer called John Meyer, whereas another guy called Paul Abascal explained that he was actually the director that was hired for the reshoots. So I don't know why there's that controversy. Mel Gibson says it's one person, this other guy says it was him. So
yeah, it's weird. You'd think Mel Gibson would just direct it himself. I mean, enough directors do that.
Yeah.
I mean, we see Clint Eastwood directing while he's playing the lead character as well. So
I don't know. He was really busy. So like Lethal Weapon 4. I can't remember Lethal Weapon 4 being a particularly legendary movie, but anyway. This is an interesting one. James Coburn, who is obviously in the movie, and was originally.
We saw him in that awful movie that we watched earlier in the year. What was that called?
Affliction.
Affliction, yes.
Yeah. So he was given some prop cigars that he was supposed to smoke on the movie set. He didn't like those; they were pretty horrible. So he actually snuck into Mel Gibson's trailer when Mel Gibson wasn't there, and helped himself to some of Gibson's cigars and used those instead. And he's talked about it subsequently. So obviously he and Mel Gibson have made up over that. This is an interesting one because it's another example of where, in this case, instead of a director, but a star basically of the movie, basically took the movie over and, had more say in it
and he had the influence to be able to do that, I suppose. Yeah.
And the studio and the producers of the movie supported him. So
it's his production company. Yeah,
it's his production company, as you say. So yeah, there you go. So interesting one, bit of controversy in both of these movies in that regard. So
and both of them have, the Limey has that famous commentary track that I'm going to have to find and listen to, and then Payback has the different director's cut. Such a weird story.
Yeah, both of them have got these weird backstories. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah, so that was Payback, and now we're going to cross live to this week's movie night for the spinning of the bingo ball, which is getting remarkably empty by this time of the year. And we'll see which movie pops up and which movie we'll be talking about on next week's show. So over to you, future Jason. Okay, here we are at the movie night, and we're spinning the bingo ball for the very first time today. And what number will it be? Single digits, please.
38!
Okay, so 38 is two hands. It's a great movie. It's a great movie.
I got a new job. And you could say I'm moving on.
Yeah, what are you doing?
Everyone down, there's a fucking hold up!
I'm
Open your drawer! Open your fucking drawer! All of you, open your drawers!
I'm working for a guy, just doing odd jobs here and there.
Right.
Give me your keys! Go!
Was that you on that Bankstown job today? Didn't know you could handle yourself so well. I got a lot of work coming up. I could use another set of hands. Well, I did see a chick called Sharon drop a big pile of cash on.
Yeah, how much?
10 grand. Then you come straight back here, all right?
Yeah, no worries. It's okay, she'll be back. Just gotta kill some time.
Who's that fucking Jimmy? Wasn't he supposed to be here by now?
You want me to find the prick or what?
Did you see someone go through me stuff?
Sorry?
Someone stole me fucking stuff! Did you see someone go through it?
I didn't see anything. Bando. No, I can't say where I am. I haven't got it.
There are no two ways about this. If you don't find the 10 grand, he'll kill you. What's happened, Jimmy?
One of the new guys. First day on the job and he rips me off 10 grand.
Bando. He's after me.
I mean, I've heard some bad stories about him.
He's all right once you deny him.
Yeah, we're gonna have to find the prick and do him.
Why don't you just go away? What's stopping you?
Give me a look at it. Unbelievable. This gun's filthy. Anyone got another gun?
And that's been paired with best laid plans.
In this small Nevada town, things are going bad for Nick.
I want to leave Tropico. I need an advance today or I'm through.
No, Nick, I told you in a month or so we'll discuss this.
And they're about to get worse.
Ever feel like the world's conspiring against you?
So what are we gonna do?
Come on, Nick, as a favor to me. It's a two-man job, Nick, except we need a driver. Christ, that was easy. What did we steal? Can I help you?
The guy you stole $40,000 from.
I don't have your stash.
Then I want reparation. You don't have it by Sunday. This is what your world will look like. $40,000.
What now?
Someone's gonna get hurt. It's just a question of who.
What's idea 2?
Well, I know I have a terrible drinking problem.
So we gotta steal the thing outright and somehow make sure Bryce doesn't report it.
Make him think he committed a crime.
You want to sit down? This is gonna look worse than it is. The girl that we met at the bar, I was drunk. I swear, I didn't touch her.
He didn't do anything to you, did he?
If she presses charges, I will go to jail.
I guess the second date's out of the question then.
I'm having a crisis of conscience here.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
I thought our date was Sunday.
It was. I bumped it up. Thought you might be getting a little flighty.
Game time.
Fox Searchlight presents Alessandro Nivola,
I'm in a doghouse.
Reese Witherspoon,
You're telling me.
and Josh Brolin.
That's right, baby. Take it all.
Best laid plans. If you're not in on the plan,
I don't know if I want to go through with this.
Just hang in there a little longer. I'll have you out in 2 seconds.
you're out.
You got a funny idea about chivalry. When me and my lady go driving, she always rides up front with me.
And there you go, Craig. I wonder what it will be. Maybe it will be a single-digit number. It's interesting because I think we still have...
I think there's only one, isn't there?
No.
There's only one single-digit number left, isn't there?
No, there's 4.
Oh, there's 4 single digits.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
So we haven't had 1, 5, 6, or 8. And that's really interesting because if you look at the 40s, we've had all of the 40s except for 48. So the single-digit numbers haven't been very well represented. And as we know, that's where all the big movies are. So
Right. Well, you say that, but then we end up watching some weird movie like Topsy Turvy, and everyone refuses to come back the next week.
I like Topsy Turvy.
I know, I like Topsy Turvy too. I'm joking. Yeah. These two were a little bit more of a slog, but then there's that controversy in the background. So,
yeah. It was interesting to learn about those things, and I did like the way that they edited the Limey. It's good to see experimental techniques like that being given a go. Because this was a time of experimentation, and directors were given more leeway, I think, to do things their way.
Yes.
And apart from Helder, what's his name?
Helgeland.
Yeah, he wasn't given leeway; he was fired. But
Helgeland, Brian Helgeland. Yeah, interesting. So yeah, there you go. And there's a book as well. So. Anyway, let's wait and see what we get.
I guess
next
that's what
week,
we didn't say is Payback was based on a book, but there was another movie made from the book with Lee Marvin in it.
Right.
So there is a comparison between Payback and that original movie as well.
Yeah, I think that's from the 1960s. Or
yeah.
something.
So
I think I saw that in the research.
Anywho,
all right,
let's wrap things up, and we'll leave things to Margaret and David, give them the final word with their review of The Limey. But until next week's show, that's all from us. So goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Now to the long-awaited thriller from director Steven Soderbergh, The Limey. Steven Soderbergh's The Limey was made in 1999. Now, don't ask why it sat on the distributor's shelf for 2 years, but now that it's here, it's to be welcomed. It's a terse thriller, but given a modern sensibility, thanks to the fragmented editing and the deliberately dislocating structure. The Limey is a top-notch thriller. Margaret?
With me, there's just the suspicion with this film that it's all style.
Yeah, the plot is a bit thin.
The overdoing of the Cockney business, the rhyming slang. I think it's interesting and stylish and beautiful to look at and well made. But
what more can you ask?
Still, I'm giving this 3.5 stars.
I think it was pretty good. I'm giving it 4.